The garage door was open. That's how I knew something was wrong. My late husband's car, his pride, his 20-year project, was gone. Just like that. 20 years of his life disappeared overnight. My son had sold it, all for a trip to Paris with his wife. But the next morning, a phone call changed everything. A man said he had Dennis's car, and that there was something Dennis wanted me to know, something he'd hidden before he died. My name is Carol, and this is the story of how my late husband saved me and taught my son and his wife a lesson they'll never forget. The garage door stood wide open. That's what I noticed first. I was in the kitchen, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold, staring through the window above the sink. The morning light spilled across the driveway, but inside the garage was shadow and emptiness. Dennis never left that door open. In 43 years of marriage, not once. But Dennis was gone now. 8 months gone. I set the coffee down and walked to the back door. When I opened it, the spring air touched my face, warm for April, the kind of day Dennis would have loved. He'd have been out there already, bent over the hood of his car with that rag in his hand, humming along to his old radio. I crossed the yard. The grass needed mowing again. I'd been meaning to call someone to take care of it. My slippers brushed over the cold concrete floor of the garage as I stepped inside. The first thing I saw was the oil stain, dark, round, and familiar. For 20 years, Dennis's car had rested in that exact spot. The stain was like a shadow of all those years, but now, that space was empty. I just stood there, looking at nothing. The workbench along the wall was still exactly as Dennis left it. His tools hung neatly on the pegboard, each one outlined in black marker. His red toolbox was closed tight. His small work journal lay open beside it, pages filled with his careful, tiny handwriting. I walked over and ran my fingers across the page. The last entry was dated 3 weeks before he died. The writing looked tired, a little uneven. Almost done. 20 years on this beauty. Can't wait to teach Carol to drive her properly. Our retirement road trip starts next summer. I closed the book and set it down exactly where it had been. The garage still smelled like him. Motor oil, leather, and that orange hand soap he loved. I could almost see him standing there again. Could almost hear the music on his old radio. Classic rock playing low as he sang along. Off-key and smiling. Then a car engine rumbled on Oakwood Drive. I turned and saw Brian's black BMW pull into the driveway. He'd told me at Christmas it was leased. Not bought, as if that made it something to brag about. He got out, 38 years old and still avoiding my eyes whenever he knew he'd done wrong. Even from across the yard, I could tell. The slouch of his shoulders, the way he shoved his hands into his pockets. The passenger door opened. Vanessa stepped out. Perfect as always. Hair sleek and dark, sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. She stood beside the car and looked at me through those lenses, unreadable. Brian started toward me, stopping just short of the garage. "Mom," he said quietly. I waited. "I need to talk to you about something." "Where's the car, Brian?" His jaw tightened. "That's what I came to talk about." "Where is it?" He looked away. "I sold it." For a moment, I couldn't even understand the words. They sounded foreign. "You what?" "I sold it yesterday," he said, his voice lower now. "I needed the money. Vanessa's been planning this Paris trip for months. It's important for her business connections. I couldn't let her down." I crossed my arms to steady my shaking hands. "That was your father's car." "It was just sitting there, Mom. You don't even drive it." "Was." He said it in the past tense. His eyes looked red, tired. "I got a good price for it, $15,000. That's fair for a car that old. $15,000. For the car Dennis spent 20 years rebuilding from scratch. The car he promised would stay in the family. I wanted to scream. Wanted to shake my son until he understood what he'd done. But 43 years in nursing had taught me how to keep my voice calm, even when my heart was breaking. "When did you take it?" "Yesterday afternoon." "You were at the store, of course." He still had a key, from before he moved out, before Vanessa. I'd never asked for it back. Dennis always said to leave the garage unlocked, just in case. You should have asked me. Would you have said yes? No, I wouldn't have. Vanessa walked closer then, heels clicking on the driveway. She moved like she owned the place, standing beside Brian with her manicured hand on his arm. "Carol, this isn't up for debate," she said smoothly. "It's done. The car is sold. We leave for Paris tomorrow. I stared at her. Married to my son for 2 years, and I still didn't really know her. Didn't know where she came from, what her parents did, or what she truly wanted. Her smile never reached her eyes. This is between me and my son, I said. I'm his wife, she replied easily. What's between you and him is between all of us. Her tone was polite but firm, like she was talking to someone who just didn't understand reason. Brian needed that money. The car was unused. It made sense. It was his father's, I said quietly. His father is dead, she replied flatly. And Brian is building a life. We both are. Surely you understand that, I didn't answer. Couldn't. I looked at my son, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Vanessa's hand stayed on his arm, possessive and sheer. We'll send you photos from Paris, she added. You'd love it there. The architecture, the museums, it's very romantic. Her voice was light, almost casual, but the words stung like salt in a wound. Brian shifted awkwardly. We should go. Still need to pack, Vanessa smiled. Yes, early flight. They walked back to the BMW. Brian looked back once, just once, as I stood in the empty garage, arms folded, slippers on, heart breaking. Vanessa rolled down her window before they drove off. Take care of yourself, Carol, she said. We'll see you when we're back. Then they were gone. The street went quiet again. I walked back into the garage, standing over the dark oil stain that was now the only thing left of Dennis's car. The air felt hollow. The sunlight slanted in through the open door, catching dust in the air like little ghosts. I picked up Dennis's journal again and reread his last entry. His dreams of teaching me to drive the car, of our road trip that would never happen. His coffee mug was still on the shelf, its handle smooth from years of use. I'd washed it, but I couldn't put it away. Everything of him was still here, his tools, his notes, his scent. Everything except the car. I closed the journal and pressed it against my chest. Outside, I heard a dog bark, a lawnmower start up down the street. Life going on, as if mine hadn't stopped months ago. I thought I'd cried all my tears. But standing there, looking at that empty space, I felt them coming again. I locked the garage door and went back inside, still clutching his journal. The empty spot where the Shelby once sat looked like an open wound. The phone rang at 7 a.m. I'd been awake since 4, sitting at the kitchen table with Dennis's journal open. Rereading the same page over and over, when the phone rang again, I almost didn't answer. Hello? Mrs. Bennett. A man's voice asked, rough and uneven like he'd been crying. This is Tom Graves from Graves Classic Auto. I have your husband's car. My heart skipped. What, the Shelby? Yes, ma'am. Your son brought it in Wednesday. Please come to the dealership as soon as you can. There's something Dennis wanted you to know. I blinked, trying to make sense of his words. I don't understand. Dennis was my friend, Tom said, his voice trembling. I was at his funeral. I should have spoken to you then, but I couldn't. Please, Mrs. Bennett, can you come? I remembered him then, vaguely. A man with gray hair standing quietly in the back of the funeral home. Where are you? He gave me the address and I wrote it down on an envelope. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said. Her stories were all the same, a pattern so precise it could have been rehearsed. She preyed on men with aging parents and family wealth. That's what she's doing to us, Carol, Dennis had written. She'll make Brian believe you're losing your mind, that you can't manage the house anymore, that selling it is the kindest choice. And then she'll vanish with the money. I could almost hear his voice in those words. He'd been careful, watching her, analyzing her like one of his old case studies. She's skilled, deliberate, he'd written. Brian won't believe it unless there's absolute proof, and I don't have it yet. Then, the key in this box opens our safe deposit at First National. Box 447. Inside are stock certificates I bought in 1994 for a patient's son. Check their value. You're financially secure. Tom knows what to do if anything happens to this car. Trust him. Protect yourself and protect Brian. He's her next victim. I love you. I'm still watching over you. My hands trembled as I read the letter again. Dennis knew. He'd been investigating her for 18 months before he died, digging into the lies, connecting the patterns, gathering what he could. And he'd died before finishing. Inside the manila folder he'd left me were photographs. Vanessa at different weddings, with different men. One older gray hair, another younger but familiar. Marriage certificates backed them up. Vanessa Cortland married Stanley Wright, Phoenix, Arizona, June 2019. Vanessa Cortland married George Murphy, Tampa, Florida, March 2021. Clippings from small-town papers. Local man reports elderly mother's savings stolen by daughter-in-law. Family business sold in suspected fraud scheme, and pages in Dennis's handwriting. Observations, times, questions she'd asked about my health, our assets, the house. His final note at the bottom of the last page read, "Need irrefutable proof before telling Brian. She's too practiced. If you're reading this and I'm gone, finish what I started. Protect our son." I pressed the folder to my chest. For 8 months, I'd mourned my husband, believing I knew everything about the life we'd shared. But he'd carried this secret alone to protect me. The realization cracked something open inside me. The tears came hard. Not gentle tears, but deep, shaking sobs. I cried for him, for what he'd tried to do, for how alone he must have felt. When Tom returned, he stood quietly by the doorway, waiting. When I finally stepped out of the car, he just nodded. "He was still protecting you," Tom said softly. "I have to call these men," I whispered. "Stanley Wright and George Murphy. I need to hear their stories." "You can use my office," Tom said. "Take as long as you need." The Shelby sat gleaming in the corner of the garage. Dennis's pride, his project for 20 years. He'd built it with care, even adding a secret compartment that had hidden his investigation from Vanessa. He had known she might come after me. "She's not going to win," I said quietly. "No," Tom agreed. "She's not," Stanley answered on the third ring. His voice was worn, patient, as though he'd been expecting this call for years. "Mr. Wright," I began, "my name is Carol Bennett. My son is married to a woman named Vanessa Cortland." A silence, then a long sigh. I wondered when I'd get this call. I gripped Tom's desk, bracing myself. "Can you tell me what happened?" He spoke slowly, carefully, every word chosen. He'd met Vanessa in 2019 at a community center where his elderly mother volunteered. Vanessa had been helping with event planning. Warm, charming, disarmingly attentive. His wife had passed 3 years earlier, leaving him lonely. Vanessa filled that emptiness with patience and affection. They married 6 months later despite his mother's quiet unease. Then came the subtle remarks. "Your mother seems confused lately. She forgot my name yesterday. I'm worried about her driving." Little by little, she made him question his mother's memory, her health. She left articles about dementia lying around. Gently suggested assisted living. "The best place in the state," she'd said. $20,000 a month. To afford it, he sold his mother's house. 42 years of her life gone in a week. $280,000 deposited into a joint account with Vanessa. 2 weeks after his mother moved into the facility, Vanessa disappeared. "Every cent gone," Stanley's voice cracked. My mom kept asking when she could go home. I told her soon. "But there was no home left," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." "She was fine, Mrs. Bennett, just old. She didn't need that place. She needed her home." He paused. "Whatever Vanessa's telling your son, don't believe it. Document everything. She starts small, little comments about you forgetting things, about being tired. Then it grows. Please, stop her! Don't let her destroy another family." After the call ended, I sat staring at the phone until Tom handed me a glass of water. Then I dialed the second number. George Murphy answered immediately. "Vanessa Cortland," he said before I'd even finished introducing myself. "Yeah, I've been waiting for someone to call. George's story was different, but the pattern was identical. He met her at his father's funeral in 2021. She said she was there supporting a friend. Afterward, she comforted him, claimed to understand grief. They started dating, and she became the only light in his darkness. His friends warned him it was too soon, but Vanessa made him feel alive again. They married 8 months later. His father had owned a small auto repair shop. George inherited it, but couldn't bear to run it. Vanessa urged him to sell. "Let's travel, start fresh." It sounded healing at the time. He sold it for $195,000. The money went into a joint account. 3 days later, she vanished. He tracked her to Costa Rica through credit card traces, but by the time he arrived, the funds were gone, laundered beyond recovery. "She targets men with elderly parents and property," George said. "She does her homework. She knows everything before she even meets you," He paused. Does your son have access to your accounts? Not yet, I said, but she's setting the stage. Then you still have time, he told me. Stop her before she gets his signature on anything. When I hung up, Tom sat across from me, quiet. Dennis knew all of this, he said finally. He came to me 6 months before he died. Said he had a private investigator friend, Peter Coleman. They were working together. Why didn't he tell me? I asked. He wanted proof. Said Brian wouldn't believe him without it. Tom opened a drawer and handed me a business card. Peter's been waiting. Call him. But first I had to go to the bank. At First National, I unlocked box 447. Inside was a single envelope, stock certificates, and another letter from Dennis. Carol, it began. I invested $5,000 in 1994 to help a patient's son start a tech company. I never thought it'd matter. But when I looked it up last month, I nearly fainted. It's worth more than we ever saved. If you're reading this, something's happened to me. Sell them when you're ready. Live freely. You're secure, Carol. Don't let anyone take that from you. The bank manager's eyes widened when she checked the current value. Mrs. Bennett, these shares are worth about $342,000. I could barely breathe. Dennis had left me security, a way to fight back. For the first time since his death, I felt something like strength. The next morning, I met Peter Coleman, former detective, calm and methodical. He already knew the story. Dennis had warned him to wait until Vanessa acted. Peter spread files across the table. Vanessa's online activity, fake accounts, credit cards in Brian's name totaling $32,000. She's building debt he doesn't even know about, Peter said. Her pattern is precise. In a few months, she'll start saying you're declining. Suggest assisted living and eventually convince Brian to sell your house, worth about $320,000. I felt cold. She's setting it up now, he continued. When they return from Paris, she'll begin the final phase. Can the police stop her? Not yet. She hasn't committed a crime here. But we can document everything. When she moves, we'll be ready. And remember, Brian must see the truth himself. That night, I made a list. Every subtle sign from the past 2 years. The missing lunch plans. The photos of my house. The forgotten conversations. The senior living brochure that fell from her purse. It was all part of her plan. Dennis had left clues everywhere, hidden safely in the one place. Vanessa never went. His garage. He'd thought of everything. Now it was my turn. When I got home that night, the house felt too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until it's hard to breathe. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Dennis used to read the morning paper, and stared at the folder of evidence in front of me. His handwriting, his notes, his warnings, all pointing to the same woman who now called herself my daughter-in-law. I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Stanley's voice, George's voice, Dennis's last letter echoing in my mind. Every word felt like a ticking clock. Vanessa was patient, clever, and one step ahead. If I wanted to protect Brian, I had to move fast but act carefully. By morning, I had a plan. I called Peter Coleman, Dennis's old investigator. I'm ready, I said. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my son. Peter's tone was calm, steady. Then we start quietly. Vanessa's good. She won't make mistakes unless she feels safe. We'll make her believe she's winning. That was easier said than done. When Brian and Vanessa returned from Paris, they came straight to my house, smiling, tanned, looking like a picture-perfect couple. Vanessa hugged me as if nothing had ever been wrong. Her perfume filled the air, sweet and overwhelming. Carol, she said brightly. You look wonderful. We brought you something special. She handed me a silk scarf. From Paris, I thanked her, forcing a smile. It's beautiful, I said, even though my stomach turned at the sight of her. Brian, my sweet boy, looked happy, relaxed. I hadn't seen that in months. He kissed my cheek and sat beside me. Mom, you seem tired. Have you been resting enough? I caught the flicker of concern in Vanessa's eyes. She was watching closely, gauging my reactions. I smiled. Just busy with the garden, I said lightly. You know how weeds never take a vacation. She laughed politely, but I could feel the tension underneath. She wanted me to slip. She wanted Brian to start noticing things, the kind of forgetfulness she'd been planting seeds about for months. Later that week, Peter called. I've confirmed 3 new credit cards in Brian's name, he said. All opened online, same pattern as before. She's already started building debt. My heart sank. Can we stop it? Not yet, he said. If we interfere now, she'll know we're watching. Let it play out a little longer. We'll need evidence that connects her to the fraud, not just suspicion. Every day after that felt like walking on glass. I kept my routine simple: gardening, baking, visiting the library, all while quietly collecting every strange moment, every whisper of manipulation. One evening, Brian called. "Mom, Vanessa thinks we should help you with the bills. You shouldn't be worrying about finances at your age." There it was, the start of her next move. "Oh, I appreciate that, sweetheart," I said gently. "But your father left everything in order." "I'm perfectly fine." Vanessa's voice drifted faintly through the phone. "Brian, tell her we can handle it." "It's no trouble," I smiled even though she couldn't see me. "That's kind of you, dear," I said. "But managing my own money keeps my mind sharp." Doctor's orders. There was a pause. Then Brian chuckled. "All right, Mom, whatever you say." After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room and whispered to the empty air, "Not this time, Dennis. I won't let her win." A week later, Peter met me at a small cafe outside town. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos of Vanessa meeting a man at a restaurant, the same man who had filed for bankruptcy in Florida after she disappeared with his money. "She's getting careless," Peter said. "Looks like she's testing new targets." "While still living with my son," I murmured. He nodded. "She's juggling both. That's when she makes mistakes. We just need to catch her moving funds. How?" "We'll set up a small trap," he said. "A fake offer. Something tempting enough that she can't resist." The idea was simple. A staged phone call between me and a financial advisor, one of Peter's contacts, about selling my house and liquidating some assets. The conversation would happen within earshot of Vanessa, knowing she'd take the bait. 2 days later, I invited Brian and Vanessa over for dinner. I cooked his favorite, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes, just like I used to when he was a boy. Halfway through the meal, my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID, Peter's number disguised as First National Advisor. I excused myself and answered, speaking loudly enough for Vanessa to hear. "Yes, I understand. Selling would release about $300,000. I'll think about it." When I returned to the table, Vanessa's smile was tight, strained. "Who was that?" she asked casually. "Oh, just the bank," I said lightly. They wanted to discuss the house. Apparently the market's up again. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but I saw it. That subtle calculation, that spark of greed. By the time dessert was served, she was back to her charming self. "You should think about it, Carol," she said sweetly. "This house is so big for one person. You could buy something smaller, easier to maintain." Brian nodded, oblivious. "That's not a bad idea, Mom." I smiled and poured more coffee. "Maybe," I said. "I'll see what Dennis left in the safe deposit box before deciding." Vanessa froze for just a heartbeat, barely noticeable, then forced a laugh. Smart thinking. That tiny moment told me everything. She'd taken the bait. The next day, Peter called. "She's already made 3 calls to a real estate agent," he said. "She's planning the sale." We were close now, but what I hadn't expected was Brian. That weekend, he stopped by alone. He looked nervous, shifting his weight like he used to when he was little and afraid to confess something. "Mom," he began, "Vanessa's worried. She thinks you're forgetting things." My stomach twisted, but I kept my tone gentle. "Forgetting?" "She said you told her Dennis's car was talking to you. That it was leaving you messages." I almost laughed, but the ache in my chest stopped me. "I said Dennis left me a message in the car, Brian. Not that the car was talking." He frowned. "You mean, like a note?" "Yes, sweetheart. He hid something from me before he died." "That's all." He nodded slowly. Okay, she must have misunderstood, but I saw the doubt flicker in his eyes. That's how she worked, a single seed of uncertainty. When he left, I sat alone for a long time. Then I opened Dennis's letter again, tracing his words with my fingers. "Protect Brian. He's her next victim," I whispered back. "I will." I promised. Peter called later that night. "She's moving fast now. She's been to the bank, asked questions about your property records. We'll intercept her next move." "But Carol, this could get dangerous." "I'm not afraid," I said quietly. "I just want my son back," he hesitated. "Then let's finish this the way Dennis planned." The next morning, I drove to the old storage unit Dennis used for his car parts. Inside, under a tarp, I found a small box labeled Project Blue. It wasn't car parts, it was a recorder, wires, and a note from Dennis. If she comes here, she'll talk. She always talks when she thinks no one's watching. I smiled through my tears. You brilliant man, I whispered. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months, because I knew what to do next. He just nodded. No words, just silence heavy with regret. That Saturday, I found him in the garage. He was sitting on Dennis's old work stool, head bowed, Dennis's work journal open in his hands. Tears streamed down his face. I stood quietly in the doorway, waiting. I found this on the bench, he said, voice thick and trembling. He turned to a page from years ago, Dennis's handwriting, strong and steady across the paper. Taught Brian to change the oil today. He's 12, still small but careful. Listens to every word. I'm proud of him. Brian's hands shook as he read. Another entry followed. Brian came by to help rebuild the engine. We worked all afternoon, barely talked. Didn't need to. These are the days I'll remember. Brian's voice cracked. I barely remember this. Working with him. I was so young. I sat beside him on the bench. He loved those days, I said softly. He talked about them all the time. Brian swallowed hard. I sold his car, he whispered. The one he spent 20 years building, for $15,000. Just to fund a trip for a woman who was destroying our family. You didn't know, I said gently. He shook his head. I should have. He tried to warn me. Those last months, he kept asking about Vanessa, about our plans, the money. I thought he was just being controlling. His voice broke. The last time we talked, we fought about her. I told him to back off. He died a week later. I never apologized. My throat tightened. He knew you loved him, Brian. How could he? Brian said, his voice breaking. I chose her over him, over you, over everything he taught me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Dennis's letter, the one he'd hidden in the car, the one I'd carried for months, waiting for the right moment. Read this, I said, handing it to him. Brian opened it carefully. His eyes scanned the words, Dennis explaining how he hadn't wanted to break Brian's heart without proof, how he loved him, how he understood that Brian was a victim too. He knew, I said softly. He never blamed you. He just wanted to protect you. Brian broke down completely. His sobs echoed off the walls, raw, heavy, filled with years of pain and guilt. I wrapped my arms around him, the way I had when he was a boy. But this time, the ache went deeper. This was grief, redemption, and forgiveness all tangled together. We stayed like that for a long time, surrounded by Dennis's tools, his workbench, his radio, the familiar scent of motor oil and worn leather. Eventually, Brian's crying quieted. He wiped his face with his sleeve. I wish the car was still here, he said. I'd fix it the way he wanted me to. I didn't say anything, just squeezed his shoulder. He closed the journal, carefully placing it back on the workbench, right where Dennis had left it. We walked back to the house. The evening light was soft, the air warm, spring slowly turning into summer. Inside, I made dinner. Brian set the table without me asking. The house felt different. Not empty anymore. Not whole yet either, but healing. A week later, after Vanessa's sentencing, I quietly paid off Brian's remaining debt, the $5,000 the fraud claim hadn't covered. I wrote the check and never mentioned it again. The stock certificates Dennis had left, worth $342,000, gave me choices I'd never imagined. More money than we'd ever saved in our entire marriage. I thought about what to do with it. I thought of Stanley Wright, whose mother died heartbroken in a memory care home she never needed, and George Murphy, whose father's shop, 40 years of sweat and work, was sold and gone. I sent each of them a check for $10,000. For Stanley, I wrote, "For your mother's memory, from someone who understands. Carol Bennett." For George, similar words, small gestures, but necessary ones. For myself, I decided to stay in the house. Maybe travel a little. Short trips, nothing fancy. Stay independent, just as Dennis would have wanted. 2 months later, on a quiet Saturday morning, I heard an engine outside. A deep, familiar rumble that made my heart skip. I looked out the kitchen window and froze. The Shelby was in my driveway, burgundy paint shining under the sun. Tom Graves sat behind the wheel. My chest tightened. Upstairs, I heard Brian's door open, his footsteps hurrying down. He'd heard it too. We walked out together and stood on the porch. Tom climbed out of the car, smiling when he saw our faces. "Bringing her home," he said. "Where she belongs." Brian just stared, speechless. Tom walked over and handed me the keys. "This was never mine, Mrs. Bennett. Dennis built it for you." I tried to speak, but my voice caught. "Tom, you paid Brian $15,000 for it." He nodded. "I know, but this car's worth more than money. Dennis would want you to have it, and for Brian to learn it. That's what matters." Brian's voice cracked. "I sold it. I threw it away." Tom looked him in the eye. "You were a victim too, Brian. Your dad knew that. That's why he did all this. To protect you." He pressed the keys into my hand. "Dennis once told me this car was never really his. It was built for his family, for the people he loved." He glanced toward the garage. "Want help backing her in?" We opened the garage door together. Tom backed the Shelby into its old spot. The same oil stain still on the concrete. When the engine shut off, silence filled the air, followed by that old familiar scent. Motor oil, leather, Dennis. Tom stood for a moment, eyes soft. "He'd be proud of you," he said quietly. "For stopping her. For protecting your son." He turned to Brian. "And he'd be proud of you for coming back. For healing." He left after coffee, hugging us both before he drove away. Brian and I stood there for a long time, the Shelby between us. "I can't believe it's back," he said. "Neither can I." He ran his hand over the hood, the paint smooth beneath his fingers. "I don't deserve this." "Dennis thought you did," I said. "That's enough." 3 months later, on a Sunday morning, we started again. Brian brought out Dennis's work journal. I carried 2 mugs of coffee. We opened the hood together and looked down at the engine Dennis had rebuilt piece by piece. "I don't know where to start," Brian said quietly. I smiled and flipped to a page marked "Teaching Brian." Dennis's handwriting was neat and steady. "Start with the oil. Check it first every time. Before you drive her, make sure she's ready." Brian found the dipstick, checked the level exactly like the journal showed. His hands didn't shake anymore. Months of therapy had steadied him. We spent the morning, working side by side, checking fluids, inspecting filters, following Dennis's notes line by line. It was physical, patient work, healing work. By the afternoon, Brian was smiling, really smiling. "I forgot how much I loved this," he said. "Being in the garage, working with my hands." "Your father loved these days too," I told him. He nodded, remembering. I can hear him again. The way he explained everything twice. The way he'd let me try, even when I messed up. He closed the hood carefully. "I'm going to take care of this car the way he wanted." "We'll take care of it," I said. 4 months after Tom brought the Shelby home, I decided it was time. Saturday morning, spring turning to summer again. I stood in the garage, keys in hand. Brian joined me. "You ready?" "I think so." I slid into the driver's seat. The leather was cool against my skin, the steering wheel worn smooth where Dennis's hands had once rested. I adjusted the mirrors, checked everything just as his notes said. Then I turned the key. The Shelby roared to life, a deep, thunderous sound I could feel in my chest. It was Dennis's work, his patience, his love, alive again. I backed out of the garage slowly. Brian sat beside me, nervous but smiling. We drove down Oakwood Drive, windows open, warm air rushing in. The engine purred, steady and strong. Brian laughed. "Dad would lose his mind right now, in the best way." "He taught me to drive when I was 17, he said. "Stick shift forward. I stalled it 6 times. He never got mad." I smiled. "This is easier." We drove with no destination, past the hospital where I'd worked, past the high school where he'd played football. Just driving, just living. When we came home, I parked the Shelby in its old place. Perfect fit, like it had never left. Dad would be proud of you, Brian said softly. Of us, I corrected. That evening, we cooked dinner together, Brian chopping vegetables the way Dennis used to. The house was quiet, but no longer empty. The garage was full again. Dennis's tools hung neatly on their hooks. His journal lay open on the workbench. The Shelby gleamed under the soft light. I looked through the window at it all and thought of his last words. I'm still protecting you. He was. Always had been, and I finally understood. I was never alone.